Hello everyone and welcome to the Council of Elrond. I'm Dave and I'm joined by my co-host Johnny. Johnny, how are you getting on?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good, good. And are you excited about the upcoming War of the Rohirrim movie?
Oh, yes. Yes. Give me Lord of the Rings any day, especially when it comes to Christmas time. And I'll be as giddy as anything.
Yeah, and exactly with this movie coming up, we wanted to take a deep dive into the character of one of the main characters, but possibly not the main character of the movie, but King Helm. He should be the main character in his own story, but we're going to get into his character, why he got given the name Helm Hammerhand, and we'll also have some time to chat about the movie itself. And actually, speaking of the movie, this is your warning that there will be spoilers for the War of the Rohirrim story. So yeah, other than that, let's just get straight into it. Okay, so Johnny, without spoiling too much about his story, who was Helm? Who was this man? Or I was going to say, what race was he? But who was he?
He was a man, clearly. Yes, exactly. Well, I think most people will know that he was a king of Rohan, and that you'll probably be familiar with the fortress known as Helm's Deep, which is obviously where the battle plays out in the second film. And that is obviously named after this character, King Helm. And as you mentioned before, his name is King Helm Hammerhand, which was a moniker, I suppose, that was given to him. I don't think that was his actual surname. That would have been quite coincidental, I suppose. He just happened to have, hands that were like hammers and could kill people with them, but that he was also, that's also my surname. What a coincidence. So this is obviously given to him because of some of the actions that he carried out, and some of the baitings he dished out to people as well, to lads on the streets that were looking him up the wrong way, I suppose. So that's who he was. I don't think I'm going to go into any further detail for now.
Yeah, and we'll get into some of these baitings that you speak of. But in terms of Middle-earth in general, I think most people are just Helm, son of whomever. So most people don't really have surnames. Apart from, is it Legolas of the Woodland Realm? But everyone is just like Legolas, son of Thranduil, or Aragorn, son of Arathorn, So Helm would have been son of Gram, actually.
Faramir, son of Finduilas. Disowned him.
Boromir, son of Denethor, and Faramir, son of Finduilas. But anyways, Helm Hammerhand, sorry, I should just refer to him as Helm. He was son of Gram. He was the 9th king of Rohan. Gram was the 8th king. And he was born in 2691 of the Third Age. And throughout Helm's life, he saw lots of war and battles between the Rohirrim and the Dunlendings as they increased their presence in Rohan under the rule of Helm's father. So I just called him Gram there. So Gram is obviously...
How do you spell that?
Gram. Like, nickname from all the cocaine quantities he's purchasing.
Right. I was like wondering if it was a weird pronunciation of the name Graham, or like Graham, So we were like...
How like
my friend Graham.
Is that how an English person or an American person says Graham?
I don't know. I've definitely heard some people pronounce Graham.
Graham.
Graham. Yeah.
Yeah. Or he could have been an ounce or a milligram. But yeah, Helm.
Or maybe he won a Grammy. They were just
maybe
like shortage gram.
Maybe
how many grams did you win?
An old lady, and he was my gram. Possibly.
Yeah. He's my Grammy. Yeah.
My Grammy. Back to the name Helm, though. His name is
also helmet, I suppose.
And but in Old English and Rohirric, the name means protection. So probably from helmet as well. Like to wear a helm is it's something that you could have. But anyways, Johnny, I mentioned that there was lots of battles and wars between the Rohirrim and the Dunlendings. Who are the Dunlendings? Like, if you've only seen the movies, which guys are these?
These are the wild folk that kind of roam around the countryside, I suppose, of the lands of Rohan, that they are seen as kind of an evil folk, I suppose, because they swear allegiances to Saruman. Maybe they're more sort of an understood or misunderstood group of people, I suppose, but they did swear their allegiances to Saruman, and so they did side with the the evil side, I suppose, if you put it in black and white terms. And so that's who they are. If we remember from the films, the guy who like slices his hand open while he's wearing an oath to Saruman, that's one of the leaders of the Dunlendings.
Yeah, exactly. So these are the lads that basically Rohan were fighting with the whole time. They didn't know much. Well, I don't know, did they know much, but they didn't care much about orcs or Uruk-hai, all from Mordor. That was a Gondor problem. But
like, that sounds like a you problem.
Yeah, that sounds like a Gondor problem. We don't know how Helm's father Gram died, but in 2741 of the Third Age, this happened, and Helm became the King of Rohan at the humble age of 50 years old. But Helm's ascension to the throne paralleled with the expansion of the Dunlendings' presence in the northwesterly part of Rohan. So that's kind of like, Isengard and above. Especially Isengard and some of the nearby valleys and such. But they had in fact taken over the area of Isengard, but they couldn't access the Tower of Orthanc itself because somebody had the keys for that, and it wasn't given to the Dunlendings, unfortunately. Do you happen to know who it was that owned the keys at this time?
Yes.
This is obviously before
Elrond.
Saruman. No. It's probably... You wouldn't know the character. Just, do you know which faction?
Oh, I just did this like recently. Feck's sake. I'm going blank now. I thought Elrond gave the keys to him. Were they in like Minas Tirith?
Yeah, I was going to say that like basically the Gondor had the keys at this time. It was Orthanc was a Gondorian structure, and it was still technically owned by the Gondorians. But
of course,
I was just throwing that out there in case. A little quiz question for you in the middle of the podcast.
Oh, very good. I failed.
Anyways, there's a huge presence of Dunlendings, particularly near the River Isen and like all the edges of Fangorn Forest. The lands of Rohan used to be home to the Dunlendings back when it was just plains under the rule of Gondor called Calenarden. So I kind of imagine this to be similar to the Native Americans, like the Dunlendings are just chilling there, and then Gondor comes in, wipes them all out, and now it's Rohan. It's like, now we own these lands. So I think it's kind of unfair for the Dunlendings, but anyways.
Did they have a flag? That's the important question. They have no flag, no land. Those are the rules.
So basically there was a geopolitical war between the Rohirrim and the Dunlendings all during Helm's life. But he was still a very wise and strong king, and I think in comparison to most of the other kings of Rohan, he's probably had the toughest life in terms of the whole time he was living. There was just war all the time with these Dunlendings. But anyways, we have a local Rohan lord named Freka who owned many wide lands. He made himself a stronghold and didn't really pay attention to Helm. He was kind of, he didn't really care about him. He was called to council a few times and he just kind of ignored them unless, it suited him to actually go. But Helm didn't really like Freka at all, but he still invited him to all the councils. Now Freka, he was kind of important because he was a local lord of Rohan, but he also had some Dunlending blood apparently, and he self-claimed that he was a descendant of the king Freyawain of Rohan, who was the fifth king of Rohan. But yeah, like the Dunlendings, like you've seen in the movies, he like long black hair, black beard. He had a lot of these.
But he had like a loose claim to the throne, basically, we would say.
Yeah, a loose claim, but it seemed like it was his own claim. But I don't see anywhere in Tolkien's writings where anyone else really respected that claim other than himself. But he was a rich man and a leader of the Dunlendings. And again, this was another thing where I thought, is he technically a leader of the Dunlendings? Because he's a Rohan lord, but people accepted him as both. I think he was invited to all these councils by Helm as kind of a political movement to try and make peace with the enemy. So
okay. Or was it more like Helm just kind of going, look at how great I am. I'm taking in these poor peasant people, the Dunlendings, and I'm treating them equally. Maybe it's kind of just like a political move, maybe a bit like a virtue signaling from King Helm.
Maybe, but this man was rich. Freka was like a rich lord. He owned many lands. But if he was a representative of the the hobo-ish army of the Dunlendings, then yeah, that would have been a nice political move. But anyways, one time Freka did actually come to the King's Council with a big entourage of his own men, and now I don't really want to call them Dunlendings, but they were his own boys, his backup, and he tried to intimidate the king, and he asked for the king's daughter's hand in marriage for his son Wolf. So, Johnny, this king's daughter, who is the king's daughter?
Well, we don't really know from the books. I know now because I've seen more about the movie that's coming up and stuff, but her name is Hera. Yeah, from the books, we only know that she wasn't even named in the books, I don't think. No. She was just known as the king's daughter that we knew existed, and we knew that she had this important plot line because basically Freka was coming in to try and use her to, weasel his way to the throne via his son Wolf. So, and then that kind of kicks off this whole sequence of events, I suppose. But that was her importance to the story, really. And we don't get to hear basically anything else about her, I don't believe. And so we know now from the trailers and from other things and from interviews that she is going to be the main character, I suppose, really, in this upcoming movie. Well, we don't know if it's main, but it seems to be that way from all the trailers and all the things that we're seeing. And that could be good. It could be not so good. We'll have to wait and see, I suppose. But I know that for a lot of people, myself, and I think yourself included as well, I would feel just maybe a little bit disappointed that we're not going to have, as you said, like Helm as the main character in the titular character in this movie. So I guess we'll have to see. In his own story. Hopefully we do get to see him have a bigger role than. I'd hate if it was just like he was in the first 10 minutes just to kind of introduce her and then she goes off and it's all about her adventure, because we know that, they might make her out to be an amazing character. That's completely up to the ability of the story writers in this situation. But we know that there's already a pretty awesome story there around the character of Helm. His character is already slightly developed. So, when we first heard about the announcement of this movie, it was exciting to be like, okay, we're going to be delving into his story and it's going to be, what he kind of gets up to. And when you, as I said, when you have a nickname or a moniker like Hammerhand, and because you're known to kind of go into battle without even weapons, because you're like, your fists are good enough, then you want to see more of that character more than just some unnamed character that we don't know anything about.
Yeah, especially when it's anime. But we'll save your discussion on the movie for later, because we'll talk about it then. But anyways, the question was, who is the daughter? And the answer is she has only, you're right, like she's only mentioned once in the book. And by the way, I'm pulling all this information, like pretty much all this information from Appendix A of The Return of the King, because the entire story is written out there. But yeah, Hera is what her name is in the upcoming movie. She does seem to be the central character. But there's only one mention of her, and it's basically when Freka asks for the king's daughter's hand in marriage, and marriage for his son. And how does Helm respond, Johnny?
He doesn't take it too well, I don't think. Ben, basically, words are said and they end up out in the courtyard having a bit of fisticuffs, I believe.
Yeah.
They're like, are you going to take this outside?
Yeah, he does. He at one point, first he calls him fat. He calls Freka fat, and he wishes to resume the council. And then when the council is finished, Helm basically walks over to Freka, puts his hand on his shoulder, and then says, like, let's go outside like grown men and deal with it there. And then basically, he one punches him in the face, and Freka dies. So it's pretty insane. Like,
that was the end of that.
I think before we got any posters or anything from the War of the Rohirrim movie, and we heard it was anime, we just imagined Helm with these two monstrous hands and how cool that would be. But this is most likely where he earns the nickname Hammerhand. And then basically he tells all of Freka's followers and sons, or he exclaims that they are enemies of Rohan. I just want to read a quote here that's taken from Appendix A. Mm-hmm. "Now, Dunlending," said the king, "you have only Helm to deal with, alone and unarmed. But you have said much already, and it is my turn to speak. Freka, your folly has grown with your belly. You talk of a staff. If Helm dislikes a crooked staff that is thrust on him, he breaks it. So, with that he smote Freka with such a blow with his fist that he fell back stunned and died soon after. How cool is that?
So he was insulting him as he punched him.
Yeah, he calls him fat twice. Actually, I just read the second.
Your
quote
belly has
there.
grown. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, all the lads, all the entourage, they basically scurry on up to the north and run away. But they did plan on coming back and seeking revenge later. But that was not to be today. They were kind of scared shitless from Helm. They were like, "Oh my god, he could just one punch man someone." So, anyways, a few years later, the Dunlendings return with Wolf as their leader now. So, I don't know what Wolf was like. I don't know what age he was beforehand, but I just assumed he was kind of a younger man, and now he's like, oh, this is their leader. He's a deadly warrior and all. And then a huge battle ensues with Helm and the Rohirrim at the fords of Isen. But the Dunlendings win, unfortunately, and Helm retreats back to the Southburg. So, Johnny, I was going to ask you, what is the Southburg? Do you know?
I don't know, Dave.
I think you do. It's just changed its name.
Oh, right, okay. So it's Helm's Deep.
Yeah. Or, well, not at this time.
It's the Hornburg.
The Hornburg, yeah, exactly. So, another name could be the Fortress of Aglarond, because the caves behind are called the Caves of Aglarond, or the Glittering Caves. This was the Sindarin name, was Aglarond. But yeah, also named the Southburg because that's Rohirrim for the South Fortress, probably because it was a defense for the southern end of the Gap of Rohan. Because
makes sense. Yeah.
What's north of the Gap of Rohan? We have
Isengard. Just gonna consult my cup here as to what is north of the Gap of Rohan.
Where does it show? It's there. Can you see it?
Oh, it's not. It's all blurred out. I need to refill it again. It's up at the top here.
All right.
It's only when I put in the hot lava liquid that it becomes revealed. It's like the One Ring, this cup.
So, Helm, he's got two sons that we know of. One of them, Haleth, is slain by the Dunlendings. And he's actually slain right up near the entrance into the Hornburg. So, quite sad. He almost got inside. But
and who else do we know to be called Haleth?
Haleth, son of Hammer, my lord.
Very good.
Well, who do you think Helm's other son is called? Or sorry, what do you think he's called?
Gambling?
No, it's a Hammer as well.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, I was like, oh, you got Hammer and
Haleth.
You've got Hammer and Gambling. That were the two bodyguards, I suppose. So I was like, maybe that was a call back to that. But no, fair enough.
Well, then you got Haleth and Hammer, who are his two sons, and Haleth, son of Hammer, my lord.
That's very good. Yeah, that's cool.
Helm's son Haleth is slain, but basically the Dunlendings besiege the warriors inside the Southburg, and whilst they're trapped there, Wolf goes east to Edoras and captures it, and basically takes the throne himself and announces himself as the new King of Rohan. So,
good move.
Food supply starts to run low in the Southburg. Actually, Johnny, quick one here as well. Where was Gondor while the siege of the Southburg was happening?
Where was Gondor?
Where was Gondor? Why do you think they couldn't come to Rohan's aid?
Well, like Gondor was always doing their own things, and they had always had their own little battles going on, and they were very rarely at peace as well. Around this time they were always fighting against different armies. And what year were we in again?
2741 of the Third Age, around this time. So maybe between that and 2759.
Sure, Gondor had already fallen into decay.
Gondor was fighting not just orcs from the east, but they were also fighting the Corsairs in the south.
Right.
So they were basically battling 3 fleets of Corsairs of Umbar down south. But also,
they had too much on their plate.
There was that, but there was also a very significant weather element to this story. So basically, during this time, a few lands, including Rohan, are affected by the long winter, which basically lasted from November until March. And this was like a terrible, terrible winter.
That's not that long of a winter compared to winters in Ireland.
No, but like winter in Ireland just means like, it's under 10 degrees and maybe it's a little bit wet and it's dark. This was like freezing cold, snow covered everything, like crops died. And along with this, we have the siege taking place at the Southburg. So like food supply was at an all-time low. But anyways, we'll move on. Helm's other son, Hamma, who's basically trapped with Helm as well. He decides to leave the fortress with a sortie to fight through their enemies to try and find food. And unfortunately, the group is lost to the snow, never to be seen again. What happens next, John? What does Helm do after hearing this news? And he's trapped alone in this Southburg and nothing to do. What does Helm get up to?
Well, there's all these stories about kind of Helm going out at night on his own, just kind of like a bit of a lone wolf, and Wolf, the son of Freka as well. So he's like he is like a lone wolf, and he goes out on his own at night, and he just kind of goes hunting Dunlendings with his bare hands, and that was just one of his hobbies they like to get up to. But he'd go out in the snowy nights, and he just kind of go through and go through these like lands and these like wasteland areas and just go killing people. But I'm struggling to remember here. I'm sure you're going to fill in the details, but we do remember that he dies on his feet, and like kind of he gets frozen from the cold, and he's not decent enough to even fall over when he's dead. He just stays standing on his 2 feet. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. But going back to like what he was doing, his little missions, I just thought this was so cool. Like first he grew really fierce after hearing the news of his second son's death. And he became gaunt from the famine, and grief set in and everything. So I have a quote here. It says, "He would go out by himself, clad in white, and stalk like a snow troll into the camps of his enemies, and slay many men with his hands. It is believed that if he bore no weapon would bite on him. The Dunlendings said that if they could find no food, he ate men." So how horrific is that?
Oh, yeah, that's class. I haven't heard that quote in a long time, but that brings back lots of memories. Yeah, the snow troll comparison, but then also the whole like, I don't know, the idea or the I don't know, prophecy or the little just maybe superstition that if he didn't have a weapon on him, then no weapon could bite him. That's so cool.
Yeah, I love that. And just like killing people with his bare hands. He already had the name Hammerhand from that's
Freka.
Yeah, that's another
could have
thing
been from before that, like.
Could have been from before, or it could have been years after. Like it doesn't say this is exactly where he earned the name Helm Hammerhand. That's just what he's known as years
That's definitely
later.
One of the events, though, that people would have talked about a lot, I suppose, afterwards. They'd be like, "Jeez, did you hear what happened last night? Oh my God, you're not going to believe this. It was one punch." And people are like, would you stop? It must have been more. No, I'm telling you now, one punch knocked him out stone dead. And that story would have like circulated like wildfire, I suppose. And then he would have become a bit of a legend in the bare knuckle boxing world.
And just interesting about this quote as well, we mentioned it in our Trolls episode, how this is the only time in the entire, like in all of Tolkien's works, where he mentions snow trolls. So it's just a little tidbit there for you. So but you can go back and check out that episode if you want to learn more about the trolls. We'll link it below.
Stay away, trolls.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't want no trolls coming here. No snow trolls online either, please.
No snow trolls, no. Johnny, going back to the name Southburg, do you know how it got its name changed? Because you kind of mentioned it there. It became the Hornburg.
Because of the installation of a giant horn?
Yeah, is that a Peter Jackson thing, or is that just like a later in the Legendarium thing? But basically, it's from this story. It's because before, like every single night before he went on these missions,
he'd blow a big horn to announce that he was heading out to put the fear of God into people. Kind of like Boromir as well, like when he'd just be like, "Right, I'm leaving now. I'm going to go fight my foes," and he'd blast his horn just so that they'd know he was coming, and so that they'd be even more scared.
Yeah, exactly. So he blew a horn in the deep before going out on his missions. It became the Hornburg. So that's even though cool. he was the only man, when the Dunlendings heard the horn, rather than gathering to kill him, they basically fled because, well, I imagine this horn is kind of like the bat symbol. They're like, "Oh God, Helm's out tonight." And like they actually feared him eating them. So yeah, that's pretty dope.
Yeah, sounds terrifying.
So you mentioned there as well how Helm dies, but I just want to read out the quote here as well because it's pretty cool. So it says,
please.
One night men heard the horn blowing, but Helm did not return. In the morning there came a sun gleam, the first for long days, and they saw a white figure standing still on the dyke, alone. For none of the Dunlendings dared come near. There stood Helm, dead as a stone, but his knees were unbent. Yet men said that the horn was still heard at times in the deep, and the wraith of Helm would walk among the foes of Rohan and kill men with fear. So again, like another spooky ass element to the story. Like people actually believe that they could still hear the horn and he's still haunting them and killing them.
Oh my god. Psychological.
He did a lot for Rohan. Even after he died, he was like still freaking the shit out of his enemies. So God bless him. Yeah, it's quite a short story. The story of Helm Hammerhand, but
yeah.
So basically, the siege is still going on, and the long winter is happening, and Helm is just going out and doing all these murders during the siege and during the long winter.
Yeah,
but
he's on his own, like, isn't he?
He's on his own, but basically the Dunlendings are still, camped all around the Hornburg, and
right,
we've got
trying to get in. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, how did the siege actually end? During the battles, some of the Rohirrim men, including Helm's nephew Freyalof, fled to Dunharrow. So people might know Dunharrow from like the men of Dunharrow, so the Oathbreakers.
It's where everyone goes to. That's where they camp when they're waiting before they go. Like where King Theoden says, "Let's go and meet at the Dunharrow, and we'll set camp there, and we'll wait for all the people to come in."
So it's like really high up on top of this big precipice, this cliff edge. And then right next to it is the Dimholt Road. But anyways, after the long winter, Freyalof returned to Edoras with a small group of soldiers to Wulf's surprise. So remember, the Dunlendings are still camped around the Hornburg, but Wulf is back in Edoras, just chilling, probably.
So who's in? Is anybody in the Hornburg? Or was like
the Rohirrim? Yeah.
Okay, they're all in there. Okay, I thought they were all killed except for Helm, but he was just on his own in there, and he was going out on his own at night and killing people.
Well, from what I take is that Helm is the only one that's going out on his own, and like, the rest of the Rohirrim survivors are still like in the Hornburg.
I thought he had the whole place to himself.
Well, that'd be kind of funny having like the whole place surrounded when there's just one man in there. But yeah, but anyways, Freyalof returned to Edoras with a small group of soldiers and basically defeats Wulf in the King's Hall, which is called...
In Edoras, it's the Meduseld.
The Meduseld. And Freyalof reclaims Edoras. So at last Gondor came to their aid as well, because the long winter was ending, and they drew the Dunlendings back. And before the year 2759 was ended, the Dunlendings were driven out of Rohan, including Isengard, and Freyalof was crowned the 10th king. And he is important because his line was the second line that would come to an end with Theoden 260 years later. So there's two different lines of kings, and yeah, this is what kind of started the second line. So yeah,
it's all come full circle.
It's come full circle. So Johnny, Helm died, and you might know with your own knowledge and history of Rohan, what do you think happened to his body?
So he's buried under the Himmelsmunde.
Yeah, exactly. He's in one of the mounds. There's a really nice quote in the same place, Appendix A of The Return of the King, and it says, "Helm was brought from the Hornburg and laid in the 9th mound, even after the white Simbelmuna grew there most thickly, so that the mound seemed to be snow-clad. When Freyalof died, a new line of mounds was begun." So that's nice. He died, and they put him in a mound, and it was almost like it was covered in snow, just like he was when he was going out murdering people. The men, the women, and the children. So, yeah, brutal.
That's nice. Just as he liked to do in life, so shall he do in death.
Exactly. So yes, I think we might have a bit of time now to discuss the War of the Rohirrim movie coming out. So Johnny, let's see, thoughts. We're getting closer. What the heck is this going to be about? We've already discussed that Hera is going to be the main character.
Well, I don't know. Have we had any new news in a while?
No new news since our podcast talking about the Comic-Con, the New York Comic-Con.
Yeah, so obviously if you want to hear our breakdown of the most recent trailers and stuff that came out in the last Comic-Con, go back and listen to that episode that we released. But waiting to see more information come out, and I'm hoping that we do get to see that it's not going to just be completely focused on Hera. I'm hoping that, I mean, as I said, depending on how they write that character, it could be a fantastic choice, but it feels like it's a missed opportunity if they don't make a movie where Helm could be the center character, because what we've just spoken about there was little things that I'd already forgotten, and just you reminded me of them there, and I'm just like, oh, this character is just so cool. So yeah, I don't know. I'm always wanting more. Every time we finish talking about Helm Hammerhand, or anytime I finish reading about a little thing about him, I'm like, oh, just want to see more Helm. So that would be my initial feeling, and so it's a little bit of disappointment, but again, it's still just very, very exciting to be, only about a month or so away, month and a half away from some new theatrical releases of a Lord of the Rings film coming to cinemas around the globe. So that's always going to be exciting, and there's going to be some great music attached to it, I'm sure. And the artwork, as we said, and as everybody knows, or I'm assuming most people will know, is all taken from Peter Jackson's kind of vision. And is John Howe, is he connected to this as well?
I don't know if he's connected, but like it's Warner Brothers, so they have the rights to all of John Howe, Alan Lee, all the styles of Rohan. Like everything looks exactly like the Peter Jackson movies, except in anime format. So it's what's his name, Kenji Kamiyama, that's in charge of this. So
correct.
And you mentioned the music as well. That'll be done by Stephen Gallagher. It's looking cool. I'm sure many of you have seen the trailer already. We're both excited for it here. But yeah, it is interesting how Hera is going to be the main character. But while I was doing research for this podcast, I went back and read the Appendix A story, and maybe the reason that Hera is playing the main character is because it is very short. Like, it covers about 3 pages. So I know.
And again, we all know the story of Helm Hammerhand, and so maybe they think they can throw in some more surprises into the story, because I'm sure most people don't know the stories of Helm Hammerhand, and they could have done it that way. But they also probably know that in this day and age, you're going to have loads of online content and podcasts and YouTubers that are doing what we're doing right now, and like maybe spoiling their big story. So maybe they were like, we don't want our story to be spoiled. We're going to create the main twists and turns with this character of Hera, and that's going to be our own little baby there, little creation. So maybe that could be a good move in the end. But we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see the story play out, probably in the perspective of a completely different, completely new character. So, not that this is like a first-person story when Tolkien writes it, but at the same time, Helm Hammerhand is the main character of that one. So this time, we mightn't even get to see much of his goings on. We might even only hear about him going out and killing people in the night.
Well, is this like, what's the rating on this as well? Is it like 12's PG or something? So, we don't know how gruesome it's going to be, or how much detail they're going to go into. They're
probably delighted that he was murdering people with his hands, because you can get away with that in animation, can't you?
That's true, yeah, I suppose.
If you're cutting people's heads off, that's one thing, but if you're just punching people and those animated characters just don't stand up again, you can kind of get
have that big like slow-mo like fall backwards onto their back, and yeah, actually make a good point.
So in one of the more recent trailers, or well, maybe not the most recent, but the one before that, we saw Saruman. And Johnny, what role do you reckon Saruman will play in the movie?
Oh, I say he'll be stirring up the Dunlendings, I'm assuming. We get to see him stirring them up politically in the Two Towers movie, so that's going to be a few hundred years later. But I imagine they'll probably show Saruman doing something similar back then as well, where he's kind of, twisting the actual facts of what's going on, and giving the Dunlendings maybe more of a cause to attack the Rohirrim. So I don't know, a lot of that going on, I'm sure. Possibly,
but if Saruman is doing that, he will have to be doing that in secret, which actually that's the first time I've heard anyone say that. So that could be cool if he is secretly stirring up the Dunlendings and telling them, I suppose he's
probably supposed to be still probably supposed to be still publicly a friend of Rohan at this time.
He would be publicly a friend of Gondor or a friend of men in general, but like he wouldn't really be known to Rohan because basically I imagine that his only appearance will be a cameo at the end, and that would be completely justified because in Tolkien's writings, it actually was at the crowning of Freyalof. So Freyalof is the guy that comes in and ends up being the 10th King of Rohan and wins and saves the day. It's at his crowning that Saruman appeared, and Saruman brings gifts, and he's speaking praise of the valor of Rohan. And basically he's welcomed as a guest and an ally, and then he was given not the keys of Orthanc, but given the keys and the residence of Isengard. And I'm going to relate back to what I was talking about earlier. It was Beren, the steward of Gondor. I said Beren, but Beren. Beren, the steward. I was thinking of your fiance. Beren, the steward of Gondor, that gave him the keys to Orthanc, as it was still a Gondorian fortress. So that's how Saruman got the keys. So yeah, but as we know as well, Saruman's purpose was evil at this point, and he sought after the Palantir, as he hoped it was still in the Tower of Orthanc. So yeah, but it would be cool. Do you remember? Do you want to tell the listeners the most recent bit of news that we heard about Saruman and voice acting from this movie?
Yes. Basically, it's going to be the voice of Christopher Lee in this performance of Saruman. So obviously it's an anime thing, so they're going to have the anime Saruman there, and then the voice of Christopher Lee. It's footage that was unused, so they're taking that and they're going to adapt that and put that into this part here. So yeah, so that's exciting.
So we're almost finished. I just wanted to put in this one other little Easter egg. I know you and I have both played the games, what are they called? Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War. I don't know, have you played both? Have you completed Shadow of War? Do you know?
I have completed Shadow of Mordor.
Right. I don't know if you remember this, but in Shadow of War, you actually get to see a little bit of Helm Hammerhand's backstory in the game.
No, I didn't play that one at all. I only played the first one.
Right.
And I completed that, and I never started Shadow of War, unfortunately.
Well, Shadow of War, you get to see his backstory, and it's wildly changed from the lore, because basically, he gets mortally wounded after an ambush by Wolf's men, during which his daughter is kidnapped. So Hera is kidnapped, I suppose. And after recovering, before he recovers, he's visited by Celebrimbor and Anatar, and they gift him one of the rings of power, and he recovers.
What?
Then. Yeah, he recovers, and then.
And why didn't I hear about this on Twitter? Why didn't I hear people getting extremely angry and claiming that this is the worst thing ever and it was the biggest insult to Tolkien?
I can get away with it in games, but anyways, he recovers. He leads a group of men to Wolf, but accidentally, fatally struck his own daughter in rage and kills her. And this further fueled his anger, and he proceeded to slaughter everyone in the room, including his own troops and captains who tried to calm him down. And then thus he transformed by the terrible incident and the Ring of Power into a Nazgul, and he became one of the 9.
Wow. That is a big twist.
That's so cool. This is kind of something that I would hope that the Rings of Power do. And not with Helm Hammerhand, but just like changing something like that there's...
Yeah, look, we already know. They're already showed us that they're not sticking to the lore in that show. So just go completely left of field and just kind of go completely crazy.
They do enough to annoy people, but they don't do enough to make it cool. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is a really cool change of lore for Helm Hammerhand. Like, it's
that is very cool.
It's completely different. It's like,
and they go completely into his hot-headedness, I suppose, and then also his just his penchant for violence. And they're like, okay, let's just completely lean into that part of his character. And yeah, I mean, that sounds class.
But what I love about this as well is it doesn't necessarily change all of the history of, well, it changes the time zone that he lived in, but it doesn't change everything that happened in the past. It just changes the end of his story. And they were like, well, what would happen if instead of him just like going out and killing people and then just freezing to death, how about he actually is attacked and then he tries to recover and he becomes one of the 9 Nazgul. Like, I just think it's cool. You know,
the 9 mounds.
Everything is hearsay, I suppose. So maybe he didn't actually. Maybe there's nobody under that 9th mound. Maybe he was an Nazgul. Maybe. But yeah, to finish up, I suppose we also have the name which you've mentioned, Helm's Deep, and that is basically named after the Deeping Gorge, which is where Helm met his end. So yeah, they call that deep Helm's Deep, and that's kind of the name of the area of the Hornburg and the Deeping Wall and that whole area. So yeah, that kind of sums up the character of Helm Hammerhand. So yeah. I hope you enjoyed this episode, Johnny, and I hope
I did. I learned a lot.
Well, I hope all you guys enjoyed this episode too. But please tell me in the comments what you're looking forward to most in the upcoming War of the Rohirrim movie. And don't forget to like and subscribe as well. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Please leave us a review if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And until next week, guys, Namarie.
See you guys.